Hi everyone and welcome to the Football Analyst. Today we're going to take a look at Barcelona's recent victory against Real Madrid in the Supercopa Final. A few things we're going to look at. Barcelona's back three dominance, particularly in possession, the forward press, and just Pedri's excellence throughout the match, really controlling things from midfield. I thought he was my player of the match, but without further ado, let's get started. So Hansi Flick set up on paper in a 4-3-3 system. However, it quickly morphs into a 3-4-3 shape with Balde moving into the midfield line with Lopez working with Yamal on the other flank to sort of create overloads there. So this 3-4-3 system lends itself to possession-based play, can also favour wide play, utilising the wing-backs or wide players and left and right forwards. It can also be very compact defensively, with Barcelona shifting back into their 4-3-3 when in a low block. So the first thing we're going to look at is the back three's dominance throughout the game, particularly in the first half, and that was my biggest takeaway, was just how effective Barcelona's back three were against Madrid's 5-3-2 kind of defensive shape. It was sort of a 4-3-3, 5-3-2. Valverde was playing sort of as a right back at times. So with the formations laid out, we can clearly see the potential for numerical overloads and pockets to play into. You know, you can triple team the wide forward. So imagine down here, you've got De Jong, Lopez and Koundé, easily able to triple team this player. You can drop a forward into midfield. So Lewandowski, one of the wide players, come in and all of a sudden you've got 3 to 4 against the two DMs. Just moving this around often leaves one of the wide halves open. So either Garcia or Koundé to retrieve and push the ball forward, because when you overload in here, it forces one of these Madrid forwards to come back and assist defensively, which opens up play for the centre halves to receive and push forward into space. But we'll take a look at some examples now. So here we can clearly see the back three in practice. Barca always seem to have an out ball to one of the wide centre backs. So we can see that all the Madrid players have been kind of pulled away from the back three. They're trying to cover De Jong's run, which kind of leaves Koundé open. We can see Garcia's down there in plenty of space too. But if we let this roll, we can see Barcelona kind of shifted Madrid over deliberately, and they're able to recycle the ball really and find space for Garcia, in this case the wide half, to push forward. But that was a recurring theme, particularly because Valverde was trying to look after Rafinha. Madrid obviously came into the match really concerned with him and opted for a back five. So there's their other four defenders, and Valverde kind of dropped back to look after that. But it meant that there was always kind of huge space for the wide halves to push into, particularly on this side with Garcia. And then here we see Barca drag the front three into close proximity. So this time they've decided Madrid to press up. But upon rotating the ball to Garcia, they've also dragged Madrid's CDMs out of position. So once this pass comes in, we can see that the CDM for Madrid has come forward, and this will leave a huge pocket of space. We can already see he's trying to guard a lot of space here, and by pulling him out, it means that De Jong is able to receive in that position. See Valverde's trying to come up to cover Balde, and this just means that there's a lot of space for De Jong to try and get in position where he can receive and turn and push forward. So pretty simple stuff, pulling apart the three-man midfield. And with Madrid's two-man midfield, against Barca's three, these pockets inside Madrid's shape were always on offer. As the two CDMs were reluctant to break shape. So as the game went on, they were becoming more reluctant to break shape, these CDMs. And what you see is pockets in these half spaces tended to become available for your Pedris and De Jongs, Lopez's of the world to drop into and turn and play these tiki-taka passes that we know Barcelona of old have been known for. And we can see De Jong just receives that, pushes forward. We can also see that he's been able to find a bit of space too in there, in a little half space, but it was too easy for Barcelona to flick that through. And then finally, when Madrid's CDMs did try to press up, it just gave Barca the opportunity to get their talented wingers in 1v1 spaces. So we can see Yamal is going to receive that in 1v1 because Bellingham, Camavinga have pressed up to try and cover Pedri and De Jong. Their forwards have all come up to try and press, and it's just left a lot of space for Lamine Yamal to receive that and turn and take on his player 1v1, knowing that he's got space he can push into. There's not going to be any help that he has to encounter. So it was really easy for Barcelona to manipulate the shape of or structure of Madrid, find pockets, really force the two-man midfield, so Bellingham and Camavinga, to make decisions about who they were going to cover. And when you've got three in midfield, that's why the 4-3-3 or any kind of variant where you've got three in midfield is so effective against the two-man midfield, because you're just easily able to overload. And with the three at the back, when it's played well, it really makes a difference. It's really hard to stop. Next thing we're going to look at is just Barcelona's forward press. So just take a quick look at that. They were able to implement their forward press pretty effectively, and I must say it wasn't overly complicated. It was simply just a 4-1-4-1 with De Jong as the holding midfielder and Lewandowski working to shape the ball on one half of the pitch so that Madrid played in the numbers. Interestingly though, Madrid opted to play in a back four when playing out, with Valverde actually up on the right wing, and they tucked Rodrigo sort of inside. So these three players here were their striker and Vinicius and Rodrigo. And even when Madrid were able to free up a wing back, let's say if Rafinha had to cover here, Bolde just simply came up. That's pretty stock standard in the pressing game, but we'll take a look at a couple of examples. So this first one, we can clearly see the 4-1-4-1, so De Jong, the holding midfielder, the line of four, and then Lewandowski. And we can also see the shape of Madrid, the four at the back, the two in midfield. And I think that's actually Vinicius in this case, kind of coming in as a pseudo-9, but it could be Rodrigo. It's hard to tell with the blurry picture, but I think it's actually Rodrigo. Valverde is out of frame just over there. But we can see how they try to close off play. So Lewandowski forces the ball to be played across, and then I believe might be Lopez goes up to press that, and Lewandowski makes sure the ball can't come back. So as we let this roll, we can see that Lopez puts the centre-half under pressure, and although he might be able to squeeze a pass to Camavinga here, it's probably too risky that deep in your own half with the numbers that he's probably seeing, the Barcelona shirt, so he decides to go long, which is fine, but that's exactly what Barcelona want, because it's pretty easy for them to cover that off, particularly when they're playing with three centre-halves. It's easy for them to win aerial battles. Now, the next example is pretty similar. It's just the other case where Madrid are able to kind of play a bit out. So in this case, they've already kind of curved and forced the ball across, and there's a curve run to stop it from coming back the other way. And as we let that roll, Rafinha is able to put some pressure on. They do kind of get it there, but Courtois really has no other option. Everything else is marked. We can see Lewandowski's marked that centre-half. He's not going to pass back there, and they're manning up the two DMs. So he plays over the top, which is quite predictable for keepers to do. It hangs in the air a bit, and what it does is it allows Bolde to come up and make the ground. He's come up really high to press, but there really is no option to go unless he wants to go back and across, but that's probably playing into Barcelona's hands. So he decides to try and chip something over the top, and Barcelona have just got numbers at the fall of the ball there, and they're able to secure the turnover, or at least quell any play out of the back that Madrid were hoping to do, and that was really the other big impact on the game. Just Madrid were not able to really progress the ball at all, particularly in that first half, where I think the score kind of flattered them. I do think they scored a corner and scored off a bit of Vinicius Junior brilliance. It could have easily been 2-0 had those things not gone their way. Now, the last thing we're going to look at is just Pedri's excellence during the game. He was my man of the match. Rafinha scored the double, but I think Pedri's ability to drop into spaces and identify and then manipulate Madrid's shape led him to being the most impactful player on the pitch. So as we move forward, we can see here Pedri quickly realises the position that they're in and that a switch will drag Madrid's players up the pitch. So we'll start to drag everyone up, which will leave a pocket of space for him to drift into behind this line because the two DMs are quite far back. So once all that moves, there should be some space somewhere here, and he's already identified that. I think he's a step ahead. And as we let this roll, he's telling them to switch. It gets rolled over. He's waiting for Vinicius to kind of drift away. Obviously, Vinicius doesn't have the best defensive awareness. He's not really interested in that part of the game. And it just allows him to... He could have received it there from Koundé, but it goes out wide. And just look at the pocket there. He knows that no one's tracked him because this player closest to him is the striker. Camavinga's kind of realised, but he's tied up with Lopez, who was quite clever positioning him in that half space, trying to double up with Yamal, keep Camavinga at bay. And as we let this roll, it gets past and Pedri's just able to push forward and really attack in that final third, put some pressure on the back line. And he was able to do that a few times. And then in this next example, we can see that he's already analysed the situation pretty quickly and he's noticed that Madrid's numbers have been dragged across. So we can see they've got 4 here trying to deal with that situation. And he becomes frustrated that Barça have chosen not to take advantage. So once we let this roll, we can see he's almost trying to invite the centre-back to come up into this space so that maybe they can create something a bit quicker. But even still, he recognises as this plays on that all he has to do is move and it should open up space for Garcia once they rotate it around. He did a head check there. If you want to rewind and catch that, he did a quick head check to see if Bellingham was going to follow him, and he did, because I think he knows that because Vinicius Junior and Rodrigo are over there, that Garcia is going to be in just acres of space because the wingers they aren't there anymore. So once the ball gets rotated, simple play out to Garcia and he's able to receive and really push forward. See Balde's keeping Valverde at bay. Rafinha's tucked in and it's just made this big space available to attack. So that was all really orchestrated by Pedri analysing the situation. He didn't quite get it the first time, but he just simply moved. But those are just 2 pretty simple examples of what he was doing in the game. I would invite any young midfielder who's got aspirations in the game to watch him and De Jong throughout this game, because as we'll see in the next slide, just his ability to control the game in his opponent's half. So 83 of his 88 passes were completed. I think that's a percentage of about 94%, with 61 of those completed passes in the opponent's half. He also had 3 key passes, the equal most for Barca, and completed the assist for the Lewandowski goal. So it's just an overall dominant midfield display. And we can see there's plenty in all directions in this half. There's not too many where he had to help play out of the back. I think that's due to just their dominance field position, but all over the pitch he was able to impact. So there you have it, a quick analysis on how Barcelona completely dominated Madrid, particularly in the first half. Despite the 3-2 scoreline, let me know your thoughts on the match and anything that you noticed in the comments below. Again, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you would like to support the channel and help it grow, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more analysis, as this would be very much appreciated. As always, thank you for watching and may your team be forever winning.